From the pasuk in the beginning of the parsha, where it says, "V'asu li migdash v'shachanti b'soichem," you should make for me a migdash and I will dwell amongst them. Rashi quotes the words "V'asu li migdash" and explains "V'asu lishmi," they should make for my name, for my sake, Beis Kedusha, a holy house. So Mefarshim explained that Rashi is coming to explain over here two different words in our pasuk, and therefore two different ideas. Number one, Rashi is explaining the word li, that it means lishmi, for Hashem's sake. And number two, that the word mikdash means a holy house, as will be discussed more a little bit later in the Sicha. But the first thing that Rebbe asks is, since these are two different ideas, why is Rashi including them both within the same Dibur HaMaschal, within the same Rashi? Rashi, in the vast majority of places, would usually use two separate Dibur HaMaschals for this. So in this case, he should have written first, quoted the word li, and explained that it means lishmi, for my sake, and then quote in a second Rashi, the word mikdash, and explain that it means Beis Kedusha. Another thing that's not understood is, why is Rashi quoting in the Dibur HaMaschal the word va'asu? Furthermore, he actually repeats it again within his commentary as well. Rashi says, va'asu lishmi, etc. Seemingly in the word va'asu, Rashi is actually not being machadish. Rashi is not telling us anything new regarding this word va'asu. Says the Rebbe, within Rashi's pirush on the word that li means lishmi, we also need to understand. The Gemara says on the word va'asu, li mikdash means misheli. Hashem is saying you should make it from that which is mine, which means that when we need to pay workers that are working in the Beis HaMikdash, fixing things, etc., so they're doing work for the Bedek HaBayis, doing things for the actual Beis HaMikdash, in the work of the Beis HaMikdash, so we pay them from Hashem's money, so to speak, from Mamein Hekdesh. So that's what Va'asu li means. You should pay them, the Mikdash should be made from my funds. Now this pshat in the word li, that it means mine, we find this al derech pshat as well. Rashi himself, on the pasuk in Parshas Toldos, where the pasuk says that that Rivka says to Yaakov, "V'kach li misham shnei gdoye izim," to bring her two goats, but the pasuk says "v'kach li." So Rashi explains "v'kach li" means take that which is rightfully mine, because Yitzchak had written in the Ksuva that this is what Rivka is entitled to, so it belongs to her. Says the Rebbe, if that's the case, we need to understand, why does Rashi in Pshut Shel Mikra need to change the word li to suddenly mean lishmi, when you can learn simply that it means it should be that which belongs to Hashem? The Rebbe says there's an arichos in the Mefarshim which explain why Rashi cannot teach the word v'asu li mikdash as it is regularly understood, li meaning for me or for my benefit, for my need, etc. But the Rebbe says even according to those pirushim, the question still remains, why can't Rashi say that li means that which is mine, like the Gemara explains, and instead says li means lishmi? The Rebbe says seemingly we would be able to explain it in the following way. On the words earlier on in the parsha, just a few psukim back, in the very beginning of the parsha, v'yikchu li terumah, Rashi explains v'yikchu li terumah, li lishmi, should do it for my sake. Now there, where it's speaking about the fact that the Yidden are going to separate and take some of their money and make it as a donation, clearly, al derech hapshat, there definitely does not make sense to say li, mean mishali. Hashem is saying take that which is mine, because the point of the pasuk is clearly that the Yidden should take that which is theirs and give it to Hashem. And since just a few psukim back, v'yikchu li, in the beginning of the Sedra, so there, li had to be translated lishmi, that it should be for my sake, rather than that which belongs to me. So it makes sense that a few psukim later, when the word li appears again, it should have the same meaning, that it means lishmi. But the Rebbe says if you think carefully about it, it's actually the other way around. On the contrary, we should actually specifically want to translate it now differently. Why? The fact that the kavanah is lishmi, for the sake of Hashem, in the case of, in the beginning of the parsha, taking the money. In other words, what are we saying? The money is going to be going over from the reshus, from the domain of the private individual, from their money, and now it's going to go to Hashem it's going to become hektish. And therefore, it's not enough that you're only giving the money practically to hektish, but rather it makes sense that the pasuk is saying that you want to designate it specifically for Hashem, even in your thought, even in your kavanah, and so on. And therefore, says the Rebbe, in the pasuk of Yikchuli Terumah, where it's speaking about taking from the money of the person and making it hektish from the ordinary money, it makes sense why we want that you should have the kavanah l'shmi. But once you come a few psukim later to v'asuli mikdash, where you're speaking about that which you're already taking, the money that has become holy already. It's already in the domain of Hashem. It's already hektish. And now you're going to build a mishkan on it, with it. So the question now is, what is still missing in the connection of these objects to Hashem that you need to now once again have in mind and say that it should be l'shmi? Or to put it slightly differently, it's specifically because v'yicholi teruma meant already that it's being done l'shmi. In other words, the kavanah was giving it to Hashem already. So it makes more sense to say now that once it's Hashem's already, so when you say v'asu li mikdash, clearly the Torah wants to tell us now something else. For example, that asiyah, that it should be done, mishali, that it's done with my money, or something like that. The Rebbe now turns to the next part of the Rashi, where we also need clarification, where Rashi says that what does mikdash mean? Beis kedusha, a holy house. What is Rashi telling us? What is he preempting? What is he answering? Why is he changing? Why does he need to change and be mechadish from the word mikdash? The word said mikdash already. What is Rashi teaching us? The Rebbe says, according to the Mizrahi, one of the commentators of Rashi, what Rashi is coming to tell us is that mikdash doesn't just mean any holy thing. The pasuk doesn't say it's a house. V'asuli mikdash. Therefore, the pasuk is telling you, Rashi is telling you, it means a holy house, because the name mikdash usually refers to the Beis HaMikdash. But the Rebbe says, we need a lot of clarification, explanation for this answer of the Mizrahi. Because the word mikdash appears already earlier in Parshas Beshalach. This is in the Shira. Mikdash Adnai Koinonu Yadecha, the mikdash Hashem that you make. So if the word mikdash in our pasuk, if the word mikdash needs to be explained that we're speaking about a holy house, then Rashi should have explained it earlier in Parshas Beshalach. The Rebbe says, on the contrary, not only doesn't Rashi explain that there, but if you read Rashi's explanation on the word mikdash, it's quite obvious that Rashi is taking it for granted that it's something so obvious that mikdash refers to the Beis HaMikdash. So why over here would Rashi have to tell us that it means a house? Also, says the Rebbe, if the whole chiddush of Rashi is that mikdash means a house and not some other item that is holy, then Rashi should have used the word Beis HaMikdash. Why is Rashi changing, first of all, from the wording of our pasuk itself, which uses the word mikdash, v'asuli mikdash, and furthermore, Rashi is changing from the common expression all over, where we refer to it Beis HaMikdash, instead of mikdash, Rashi says Beis Kedusha. The Rebbe now addresses another way how Mefarshim try to deal with this problem. Some Mefarshim say that what Rashi is coming to explain is that how could you even say v'asuli mikdash? You should make for me a mikdash. Kedusha, the idea of a mikdash, is not something that's being accomplished by the Yidden. That Hashem is the one that infuses it with kedusha. And this is why Rashi is coming to explain, no, the tzivui is that we have to make the house, the bayis kedusha, that's the mitzvah on us. But the Rebbe says this is problematic, because again, from the Rashi that we learned, from the fact that we learned already in Beshalach, and the way Rashi explains the pasuk over there in Beshalach, Mikdash Adnei Koinonu Yadecha, as we said before, to Rashi it's obvious that the word Mikdash is the shortened name for Beis HaMikdash. And there's no need to teach us over here that V'asuli Mikdash is telling you not about that it's your job to infuse it with Kedusha, but your job is just to make the Beis HaMikdash. Another point says that Rebbe has mentioned already earlier, if that's the case, the Rashi should have used the words Beis HaMikdash, not Beis Kedusha. Says the Rebbe, the explanation of all of this is, the main question that Rashi is actually coming to deal with is, how does it even make sense to use the words V'asu li mikdash? Usually the word mikdash, as said, refers to the Beis HaMikdash, the Beis HaMikdash in Yerushalayim. Going back to that same pasuk in Parshas B'Shalach, the pasuk says, "Tiviemoy v'sitaemoy," etc. You should bring the Yidden Bahar Nachaloscha to your mountain, the mountains of your heritage. It's mountain of your, to the mountain of your heritage, to the Har Moriah. And then it says, "Mikdash Adnai Koinanu Yadecha." That's where the Beis Hamikdash is. So Mikdash usually refers to the Beis Hamikdash. But here we're clearly speaking about the Mishkan that's going to be made in the Midbar, which is called in the pasuk Mishkan. In fact, the very next pasuk is going to refer to it as Mishkan, Eis Tavanis HaMishkan, the form of the Mishkan. So seemingly over here it should have said V'asuli Mishkan. This is the question Rashi is coming to deal with. Now the Oira Chaim answers that V'asuli Mikdash is actually a general mitzvah that would apply for all times, whether in the Midbar or when they go into Eretz Yisrael. So that's what V'asuli Mikdash refers to all the different kinds of Mishkan or Batei Mikdash. And then the next pasuk is telling us specifically about that which will be made in the Midbar, according to the order that's discussed further in the Parsha. That's the way the Ohr HaChaim deals with this problem of why it says V'asuli Mikdash. But the Rebbe says Rashi clearly doesn't learn like that. Rashi negates this pirush. Because on the words in the very next pasuk, Hashem says, like everything that I'm showing you, the form of the Mishkan, that's the way you should make it, etc. Rashi explains that this pasuk is connected to the previous pasuk of V'asuli Mikdash. In other words, you should make the Mikdash as everything that I'm showing you, which is the form of the Mishkan, which is clearly then telling us V'asuli Mikdash, that you should make the Mikdash as I'm showing you the form of the Mishkan, is the one and same command. So it's not referring to the Beis HaMikdash, it's clearly referring to the Mishkan. Furthermore, according to Rashi, in this command V'asuli Mikdash is specifically not included the Beis HaMikdash. That's going to be for future generations. Because the pasuk says you should make the Mikdash like I'm showing you the form of the Mishkan, and the Beis HaMikdash was clearly not like the form of the Mishkan. In fact, says the Rebbe, that's why Rashi is very particular with his words. When the pasuk says V'chein ta'asu l'doros later on, they should do this for all generations, Rashi says that's only going to refer to the kelim of the Mishkan, that they have to be in the same form as the kelim of the Mishkan. In other words, the kelim of the Mishkan have to be made also in future generations, the Beis HaMikdash in the same way, but clearly not the Mishkan itself. So back to the original question, it's the answer to this question, why is the Mishkan being called Mikdash over here? And this is what Rashi is coming to deal with. And he says Mikdash in this pasuk actually means Beis Kedusha, a holy house. In other words, Mikdash in our pasuk is not a noun. It's not an abbreviated version of Beis HaMikdash. The pasuk is saying, make a Mikdash for me. Rather, it's more as an adjective. V'asuli Mikdash means you should make for me a holy house, a holy place, rather than a place of choil. If you're speaking about making a holy house, that could apply to the Mishkan exactly like to the Mikdash. In other words, Mikdash means a thing, a house that has in it, or is for the purpose of Kedusha. And that term could be used for the Mishkan as well. Or to put it slightly differently, the Chiddush of Rashi is not like we thought before, that Rashi is coming to teach us that it has to be a house. Mikdash means a house. But rather his main Chiddush is actually in the word that Rashi says, Beis Kedusha. The main Chiddush is in the word Kedusha. That in our pasuk, when it says V'asuli Mikdash, the word Mikdash is again not a shortened version from the word Beis HaMikdash, but rather V'asuli Mikdash means make for me a holy place. So why is Rashi even saying the word Beis Kedusha? Even though that from the word Mikdash itself, according to the simple meaning, you don't even have any proof that was speaking about a house. It might be some other holy thing. The only reason why Rashi says Beis Kedusha is because practically the holy thing that we're speaking about in our particular case happens to be a bayis, happens to be a house, as could be understood from the continuation of the psukim. It says V'asuli Mikdash, and then it says that you should make it according to the form of the Mishkan that you saw on the mountain. As again, according to Rashi, this is all one flow. So we know that this item of Kedusha that's going to be being made is some form of a house, of a Mishkan. But again, it's not referring to the Beis HaMikdash. So far we explained how the word Beis Kedusha or Mishkan rather, could be referred, Vasuli Migdash, that the word Vasuli Migdash could be referring to the Mishkan, because Vasuli Migdash just means make me a holy house. But that's not enough, because this is only answering that Migdash could be referring to Mishkan as well. But the question still remains, why should the Pasuk use the term Migdash over here, and not the common expression in all of these Parshias, Va'asuli Mishkan? This is why Rashi first says, Va'asuli means Va'asul Lishmi. Make it for my sake. That the command in our Pasuk is not only about making the Mishkan, or the Mikdash, but rather specifically the Pasuk is speaking about the idea that the Asiyah must be done with a kavanah that's for Hashem's sake. And in order to explain this halacha of what this is all about, Va'asuli, doing it Va'asul Lishmi, that's why the Pasuk is going to use the words Va'asuli Mikdash. What does this mean? How do we understand this? So the Rebbe says, in the words Va'asuli itself, it means Va'asul Lishmi, doing it for Hashem's sake. The question is, as we said earlier already, since the Terumah was already made with, since the Terumah, as we said, you did the Yikhuli Terumah, that it was done for Hashem's sake, the money was already separated for Hashem's sake, it was made into Hekdesh already. So we asked before, what's the point that the Mishkan has to be made again with the Kavanah of Lishmi? This is why the Pasuk is saying Va'asuli Mikdash, which according to Rashi means make for me a Beis Kedusha, a holy house. Meaning to say that when we say Va'asu over here, Va'asu Lishmi, there needs to be an extra kavanah, a special kavanah, an extra kavanah, that it should be a Beis Kedusha. What does it mean, a Beis Kedusha? Not only a house of Kedusha, a house that contains in it contains in itself something else that happens to be holy, but the house itself is holy. The Rebbe is now learning pshat that it should actually be read as Beis Kedusha with a cholam. In other words, it is a holy house. The Mishkan itself, this Mikdash itself, is a holy house. The Rebbe says, you're going to say, then why don't we say Bayis Kodesh? Why Bayis Kedusha? So the Rebbe says, because we do find that the word Bayis could also, is also sometimes a Lashon Nekeva, and you could use the term Kedusha even though that's Lashon Nekeva. But what's the point? The point is that from this we see that the making of the Mishkan is going to make a very major transformation in the things that you're going to be making the Mishkan with. That they themselves should become holy. They are all part of this Bayis Kedusha, this holy house. That means to say, before it was Va'asuli Migdash, before they were made into the Mishkan, so they had a certain level of Kedusha, but that was just that they became Mammon Hekdesh. It's money that belongs to Hekdesh, money that belongs to Hashem. But through Va'asuli Migdash, they now become holy, not only by the fact that they belong to Hekdesh, but that they themselves are being used and are a part of this holy house. Says the Rebbe, and therefore, since through this Asiyah, we're now causing a new and a higher level of Kedusha within the things that were donated for the Mishkan, that's why there needs to be this extra kavanah, that this needs this extra kavanah to make it, to bring it up to that level of holiness. In fact, the Rebbe says, according to this, we could say there's an afkamina also lahalacha, that it's not enough just that it should be just a general kavanah lishmi, that we're doing it for Hashem's sake, but it has to be specifically that it's being done for the kedusha of the Mishkan. In other words, for the special holy house, for the special higher holiness that comes through this va'asu. Says the Rebbe, according to all of this, we could also explain another aspect, another idea in Pirush Rashi, and that is the word Terumah generally can be explained in two ways. Targum explains it. Afroshusa means something that's separated. The word Terumah could also be from the word Harama, lifting up. Rashi in his Pirush on Torah explains as the Targum that Terumah means a separation. Based on what we can discuss, we can explain it. But first, discussing for a moment the difference between Hafrasha, separation, or lifting up. Hafrasha means that the thing only was moved or separated from other things. That means in essence it's still basically the same as it was before or as other things. The difference is only it now moved the Rishus, it changed where it belongs, changed whose possession it's in. However, when you say the word harama, harama means it was elevated. It was, in essence, it was changed. The whole thing, the whole item was lifted up to a higher level. So it's no longer connected with the same level, the same realm as it was before, and the other things that it was taken up from. According to Rashi, this is the difference between these two psukim. V'yikhuli terumah and v'asuli mikdash. V'yikhuli terumah means you're giving money for the terumas hamishkan. This is still in the gather and within the realm of hafrasha separation, which means that even though yes, it became the money of Hashem right now, mamin hekdesh, but the whole basis of the kedusha is more about that it changed possession. It moved from the reshus, from the domain of the regular ordinary person, and now it became holy. And therefore, this kedusha is more like hafrasha. It was separated. It was moved from other things. Whereas v'asuli mikdash means that you're taking these items that were donated for the Mishkan and you're making them now part of the Mikdash. And this way you're lifting them up. They're becoming completely elevated to a higher level of Kedusha, completely removed and higher than their previous situation. Says the Rebbe, the Hayra of all of this is, we know that it says, v'asuli mikdash v'shachanti b'soichem, we need to make the Mikdash inside of each and every one of us. Every single Yid needs to make out of his own house a Mishkan, our own Mikdash for Hashem Yisborich. As the Pasuk says, "V'asuli Mikdash shachanti b'soichem," the Razal say, it doesn't say b'soichem in it, Hashem will dwell in it, but b'soichem in them, because every single Yid needs to make a Mishkan out of his own soul. And here we have two stages, two avodas. There's first v'yikhuli terumah, which is, we said, is hafrasha separation, and then we come to the higher stage, v'asuli Mikdash, lifting up. First there's the avodah of separation, meaning a Yid needs to separate his own house from the houses around him. That in his house should be noticeable that it's different. Yes, you're doing Gashmiistic things, like in other houses, but in this house it's being done with a different purpose, with a different intention, with a different goal. Kol Maasecha Yiyu L'Shem Shamayim, everything is being done for the sake of Hashem. Now the actions the person is doing are still Maasecha, it's your actions, meaning they're still mundane things, but they're being done for the sake of Hashem. In that, they're becoming separated, removed from other mundane things, from the houses around them. But the ultimate goal is harama, lifting up, v'asuli mikdash. The house should be elevated through the fact that you're transforming it into a mikdash. Then there is no inyan echol, there is no mundane in this house. Everything is a bayis kedusha, it's all holy. It's a mikdash lo yizbarich. And that is through the house and everything inside of it being permeated with ner mitzvah v'toyra. Then you don't feel any choil, anything mundane in this house. Because generally in every single detail in the house is all about the mitzvahs that are being done with that object or through that object and so on. And through every Yid making his own house for a mikdash lo yizbarich. This is the quickest hachana to the binyan beis hamikdash hashlishi, the mikdash adnei koyron yadecha b'meheira v'yameinu mamash.